Hey guys, so just a quick message before this kicks off. It's turned into a freaking long video because of how many changes there are coming with the preseason, so I've included timestamps in the description below. If you're not interested in parts of this, you can skip to the parts you are, or you can just watch the whole thing. Either way, enjoy the video. Hey guys, it's Fi here, and today I'm going to be bringing you a patch 3.14 analysis video. So this is obviously the big patch, the big preseason patch in ready for season 4. It's got all the jungle changes, item changes, and major champion and support changes as well. Now I'm just going to give you the rundown on what I actually think is good, what I think is bad, the impact I think it's going to have in the game. So let's just jump right to champions, because the general UI things are just health bars. I'm not really going to analyze that. I'm sure you get pretty bored pretty quickly. So Corki's always had this problem of his mana costs were way too high for the damage that he output. Now what I mean by that is that it's just not efficient to use your abilities in a full rotation, like all your abilities in the rotation, because you'll just run out of mana before you actually kill your opponent. Last patch they nerfed the damage, and this patch they're actually reducing the mana costs of things so that it kind of falls back in line and it becomes efficient again. They have reworked his Q, so the mana cost is reduced, as I said, but it now lobs the bomb to the target rather than just instantly activating a Q. Now this is kind of like going to work like a Twitch Flask or a Ziggs bomb, I assume. I haven't actually obviously played it because it's not on live yet, but that is how it sounds like it's going to work, which is a pretty cool thing because of the range increase as well. So the range increase means that no other AD is going to be able to match that or rival that range, and so Corki can just poke over and over with this spell, especially considering the mana cost has been reduced. So now it's actually going to be really efficient to just poke your enemy down with Q and then dive in for the final blow. This is what I mean as well with the diving in for the final blow with the Gatling gun that has been reduced to 50 mana at all ranks rather than 60, 65, etc. This used to be the most inefficient spell for Corki to ever use in lane because it really didn't provide that much. Like Armor Pen is quite good when you're going for the kill, but when you're just trying to trade, you're not going to get enough auto attacks off to really make it worthwhile, considering your Q does magic damage anyway, so it's not really applying off of that. Now when it's reduced to 50, it's less punishing to use that in lane, and so when you're actually going to go for the kill, you can use it and you can still have enough mana left afterwards to carry on fighting. The Q as well kind of turns Corki into a really pokey champion rather than just a little bit of poke and then an all-in champion that he is at the moment, because obviously this has like a wind-up time with the lob as well. It means that you can just poke, especially with your ult, you poke even more, and then finally when they're pretty low on health, you go in for the kill, but you don't have as much kill potential, I would say. It's kind of the same situation now that Caitlyn's in, where she's a lane bully, she pokes a lot from range, but then she doesn't necessarily have the same all-in kill potential, high damage that other ADs do. So the final change with Corki is that his missile barrage has been changed, so its total attack damage ratio increased to 20, 30, 40% from 20%. Now what they're trying to do here is steer him away from the magic pen kind of build that people were going before, and so rewarding people for building AD and having the ult scale with AD, so the more AD you buy, the more ult damage you're going to do. This is a really clever change because it means you'll probably still get Salt Boots, don't get me wrong, because he still does a lot of magic damage, but right now late game your missiles will actually start to do a hell of a lot more, and this is going to really reward him for being able to hit those rockets. What I'd expect to see on Corki now with this kind of AD ratio is a Bloodthirster very early on into the build. Last Whisper doesn't really affect the ult as much because it's magic damage, but so what you probably see is like a Triforce, then Infinity Edge, then a Bloodthirst that gives you a ton of AD, like a huge amount of AD, and so it means your ult is actually going to really, really sting. Okay, so let's move on to Gragas then. The cast range of his barrel has been decreased, but like we're trying to compensate it by letting it explode slightly quicker. Now this is a kind of needed change because at the moment Gragas is tanky as fuck, but he's so like high range that it's really hard to get on him anyway. When you're making him that tanky and do that much damage, you kind of have to have a negative side, and this cast range is probably that negative side. 150 range isn't huge, but it's enough of a nerf to mean that you can actually engage onto him. The other thing as well, which I really like, is his body slam. The cooldown's been increased to 12 seconds from 7, but the cooldown's reduced by half if Gragas collides with the unit. So it means that actually, if you hit the E, if you're using it offensively, it's actually only 6 seconds, which is a kind of buff. But then if you're using it to roam, then it's a 12-second cast time. So cooldown, sorry. So they're kind of nerfing Gragas' potential to get around the map really quickly, which is really clever because at the moment he can just push his lane with his barrels because he does so much damage, and then he just uses his E like 2 or 3 times and can get to bot lane and ruin my day like all the time. I've had it so many times with Gragas now that he's popular where he just manages to ambush us from behind, and it's just really difficult to deal with. Now, the other thing as well, the E deals full damage to all targets hit, so it means that if you can't like stand in minions anymore when he casts it on you. Like before, good players would have just walked into a minion wave when he E's you because it does reduce damage. That doesn't affect it anymore. So they actually kind of increase his damage and his kill potential, but they've reduced his roam potential. So let's just look at Leona very quickly. They've basically changed it so she's now going to be more tanky, which is kind of crazy because she's already really tanky, and this is going to make her even more tanky. Now, they've reduced like the base bonuses for armor and magic resist, but they've increased, or they've given her 20% of her armor and magic resist. Now, this is going to be really clever because in Season 4, like supports are going to start to get items. So Leona is going to get tanky items like Randuin's, Locket, those kind of things that make her a really difficult thing to deal with. And so when she pops a W late game with these items, it's going to really sting. It's going to be so hard for you to get through that, and she's going to actually she's going to live a lot longer than she normally would. This doesn't really affect her early on because bonus like armor and bonus magic resist, obviously bonus means that it's not your base values, it's just what you've got plus it. So it's not really going to have that much effect early, but it will have a really big effect later. Now, this isn't really that big a change. Like, it's going to be easier to avoid the ultimate because you know if you can flash out or not, I guess, but that's not a huge deal for Morgana. The Nasus, so this change is needed, but I don't think it's enough. In all honesty, Nasus is really good at farming his Q stacks. Like, he's a problem at every elo, but I think he's especially a problem at Diamond elo at the moment because people are good enough to know how to farm with his Q properly and manage the cooldown. And it's not uncommon for people to have about 350 stacks by about 15 minutes into the game. Now, if you imagine how much damage that is, I have about 1500 health on an AD, 15 to 20 minutes into the game, and he can do around 400 to 500 damage with a Q to my face. That's like a third of my health just gone. So I think they kind of need to nerf the rate that his Q gains. But that aside, the change they've done is they've reduced his lifesteal to 10, 15, 20 from 14, 17, 20. So they've obviously taken off quite a bit of his early sustain, which is good. So it should be easier to punish him because at the moment he could kind of just ignore you with like a flask and his passive, whereas now he's probably going to have to back off a little bit and it's going to be a little bit harder for him to get those stacks. Now, this Nautilus is kind of a late game change. So they're increasing his root duration at later stages into the game. So it means that kind of in team fights, you're going to have to start considering buying tenacity to actually deal with Nautilus, and he's actually going to be more useful. Early, that root is ridiculously strong because you don't have as much health, so you can dish out a lot more, like a higher proportion of your health in that time. Whereas when you got to late game, it's kind of such a small thing, you kind of just shrug it off, and then he's pretty useless. Okay, this Nidalee change I do want to mention because Nidalee is overpowered as fuck right now. Like, I've started banning her in solo queue because people will just, you can dodge every spear out of 20 but one. So a 1 out of 20 she hits, and suddenly you have to go back to base and you have to heal because it does so much damage. It's an absolutely ridiculous kind of mechanic, and it's really strong, so I'm glad they're actually trying to deal with it. So now it calculates damage based on where the javelin was initially cast, which means you can't do the cheeky little cougar form backwards, pounce backwards, and while the spear is in the air to do even more damage, which is good. So that should reduce some of the max range damage, and it no longer gains like bonus damage if it's done in auto attack range. So that means if you actually dive onto Nidalee, you won't have she won't do as much damage to you with your spear. Like before, she actually did quite a lot of damage because you get the initial bonus, but now without that bonus, it's going to mean you can actually deal with Nidalee a little bit more. Like, you'll be able to fight her and not be punished as much. So what they're really trying to do is just reward people for diving in on her to shut her down and make it so that she really is only useful the further away she is. And that is kind of what it should be like. Her weakest point should be when someone dives onto her. So this is a pretty good change. The other good change as well is this bushwhack. It's going to the duration is reduced 8 seconds from 12. So at the moment it lasts 12 seconds. That's a huge amount of time. Like if a jungler gets hit by that, 12 seconds is quite a long time to be hanging around to try and like not let your enemy see what you're going to do next. So I really do like that change, especially early game. It's going to have a quite a big impact, I think, on how secure Nidalee is going to be in lane. Now, these new changes are pretty standard because they're just falling in line with the smite changes. So the smite does less damage, but it's also reduced cooldown, and so they're just taking the consume down. Obviously, I'm guessing a lot of you have seen the Trick 2G video where they didn't change the consume on the PBE, and so people smite were doing less damage than the consume, and he was just running in and out consuming someone's smite, which is crazy. So they've reduced the cooldown at earlier ranks to fit with the smite cooldown as well, and they've reduced the damage, as I was saying. The heal at earlier ranks has also been reduced, which is pretty much just because the cooldown has been reduced as well. So it's not as effective to nom, but you can do it more often. Okay, so this Sivir change is actually pretty big. Now, a lot of people were expecting a Sivir nerf, including myself, because she's really strong, but this is really hitting her early. So it now scales with total attack damage rather than bonus damage. Now, I'll come back to that in a second because that is a kind of saving grace to this change, but it's actually still really going to hurt her. So let's just look at the damage now and then damage then. So damage now 25 and damage then before is 60. So that's a huge reduction. That's over half of the damage just suddenly gone. And now we go to like the late game, which is where you can see it is the worst. 105 plus in like comparison to the 240 that it was before. Now this obviously looks really, really bad, and it is bad, but not quite as bad because of the total attack damage that I'm going to come to now. So what the total attack damage means is obviously it's like, say at 20 minutes into the game, you have 150 attack damage on Sivir. Well, your base is probably around 40 at that point. So it means actually your bonus AD is probably only about 110, say. Now, with the total attack damage, it means it's going to take the whole 150 into account when calculating damage for the Q instead of just the bonus 110 before. So you will have like a higher multiplier or higher plus AD value with the Q, but obviously that's still not going to make up for the don't know, 120, 130 damage that you're missing from the 240 to the 105. So this is a really big nerf to a Q, but it's not as bad as it looks. So she'll still be playable, she'll still be good in the lane, but you're going to have to poke way more. Like you're going to have to hit your Q way more times to actually do as much damage as you were doing before. The other thing as well is the damage fall off per target reduced to 10% from 20%, so it means that if you hit these through minions in lane, you're still going to do more damage than you would have before, which is pretty good. It means that like it's harder for enemies just to sit behind minions and not take any damage, but obviously now when you actually full engage someone, that Q is going to do a lot less damage, so you have to put them on lower health before you go in. Okay, so this Vayne Condemn, this is quite a big like write up for a very small change. So basically it was just like when you ease someone away, there was a split second, about half a second, where they couldn't do anything even though they weren't stunned. So that kind of like defeats the point of having the Q, like the E, sorry, when it's supposed to stun and it kind of semi-stuns anyway. So they just removed that, and Condemn now deals damage after knocking the target back. Wall hits are now displayed as critical strikes, more of a visual upgrade than anything else. So this actually isn't a big change at all. It's a slight nerf to Vayne because it means enemies can react quicker after being condemned. Like you'll see a lot of people would just condemn in the middle of a fight, even if they weren't going to get the stun, just so that they get the damage and also the mini stun or whatever that was kind of a bug in there. So, support champion changes. This is a really big section, so I'm going to try and explain it as much as possible. Now, the first thing I'm going to say to make everything easier is basically what they've done is they've reduced the effectiveness of every support spell, but they've buffed the AP ratio, so it means that it's hard to explain, but basically, the more AP you build, the more effective your spells become. For someone like Janna or Nami, it means that the more AP you build, the more movement speed you gain from your passive. So while it just means that you need to build AP to make your spells more effective. So in the end, it's actually going to be a buff, but it kind of is a nerf early game because they reduce the effectiveness and just increase the scaling because all these supports are going to now be building AP into the game. So it just means that the more AP you have, the more effective your spells become, basically. So let's just look at Janna very quickly. Passive is a big change because the movement speed is underrated. Well, it's not really underrated, but not really thought about that much, but it actually is pretty big. So they've now meant that it's an 800 range, so it's really only going to affect your lane partner. They've made it more effective, but it's not really that effective, like 2% extra. Obviously does not make up for the fact it's not global anymore, so that's kind of a nerf, but it's a clever nerf because they've always said the Janna passive is OP, which I agree with, and this is a kind of balanced way of fixing that without destroying Janna as a character. So Howling Gale now, obviously, this is an example of what I was saying with the more AP you build, the more effective it becomes. Now gains an additional 0.1% ability power ratio per second the Howling Gale is charged before release. So it means that the more AP you have and the more damage it's going to do, the longer it charges. Obviously, this is what I was saying about they've nerfed it itself. AP ratio reduced to 0.35 from 0.75, and that all of these changes, they're reducing the ratios because supports will have more AP now. Like, they have more gold. They are encouraged to build AP items, which means that obviously before they didn't have a lot of AP because they couldn't build AP necessarily because they were too busy buying support items and wards. So now that they are having a ton of AP, it means that they have to reduce the ratios to obviously balance everything out, which does make sense. It just looks really bad on these patch notes, but actually when you're in game and you're building AP, it's not going to be that big a deal. So this is very quickly, I'm just skimming through these because a lot of these are the changes that I kind of summarized at the start with how they're just reducing the effectiveness and making it scale with AP. So here you go. Buff now scales with AP. The self-movement speed buff changed because it now scales with AP. The slow debuff again scales with AP now. So you can, the more AP you have, the more it will slow, which is actually a really cool effect. I really do like that. And they've reduced the AP ratio. Her E, the attack damage buff on the shield, now scales with 1+ attack damage per 100 ability power. Now this is freaking ridiculous. I'm not even gonna lie, this is crazy as fuck because I went into the PBE, I went full AP runes apart from armor on Janna. I bought a Doran's ring to start with. Yeah, I know people are gonna flame me for that, but I bought a Doran's ring to start with the support mastery, so I at least had one ward, and then I buffed my AD and it gave like, I'm not sure exactly the numbers, but it basically meant that you got like you got an extra Doran's blade or longsword with on your AD when you used that on the shield. So it's like the normal plus AD plus an extra longsword on top of the normal bonus you got. So that's like ridiculously strong, and this is going to get nerfed. I'm calling it now that this E will get nerfed at some point because like even level 1, when you put that shield on someone and you start auto attacking them, like your ID will do a shit ton of damage. Okay, so now I've had that little rant. Let's go to Lulu. Now Lulu's basically the same again. They've just reduced the base damages because they've added an AP ratio on her help picks, so her fairy champions. It means that when you shield someone and your AD like attacks, then obviously your help picks attacks as well, and that help picks damage is going to do more the more AP you have. The Glittance decays to 0. Obviously it's like a 90% so or something ridiculous, and then it decays over time. Well, that decay will go down to a number based on your AP ratio, so it could mean that by the end of the duration you're still at like 10% slowed, which is pretty strong actually, and means that chasing someone down is going to be a lot easier. Again, movement speed bonus now scales with AP. Okay, so help picks offensive damage ratio has been reduced because obviously Lulu's going to have more AP. There's a very strong theme across all of these supports because, like as I said at the start, a support's going to build more AP, so they have to reduce everything, all the scalings, to make it more fair, I guess. Otherwise they're going to just be doing so much damage. So again, passive, the more AP you have, the faster you go. This reduced AP ratio on a bubble is kind of dumb because the bubble does literally 0 damage. Anyway, I'm not even, like, the base damage on that is poop, so you only use it for the CC. The slow percentage now scales with the AP as well, which is pretty strong. Like this, it has a 0.05 AP ratio, so it's not going to have like a ton of damage, but when you're building AP and you're playing with like a Caitlyn or an auto-attacking champion, your E is going to do so much damage right now. Again, they've just reduced AP ratio, and her W is just being so each bounce scales with AP again, so the more AP you have, the more healing you'll do every bounce. These Sona changes are kind of strange to me, because Sona's going to be building AP now, which means that her power chord and her Q are going to be doing so much damage. Like, even though the ability power ratio has been reduced to 0.5, it means that mid game, like, her Q damage will do a ton. Like, I'm not even joking that, like, obviously you see now in Season 3, Zyra's would be building AP to do damage in mid-game team fights, and it wasn't uncommon for them to out-damage like the top laner or the jungler when they built AP. Well, Sona's going to be in that situation again, because she already does a ton of damage, and now mid-game she's going to do even more. So they've increased ability power ratios, or they've added ratios for her power chord, which makes sense because obviously sports building AP. Base heal is going to be reduced on a W, which is really good, because at the moment, like level 2 or 3, your AD can just go ham and then you can heal up the damage that is taken. Whereas now it's going to be slightly more punishing for you just taking 3 damage. So I do like this change, though it's not really that much. Like, it's at 5 off each rank, so that's not going to have a huge impact, but at least that should be something. The E now scales with AP, so the more AP you have, the faster you go. And the active speed boost changed to 4 instead of like 6, which is okay considering you have an AP, but it's going to be, so this E is going to be weaker early, which means it's going to be harder to chase down and escape. Crescendo does reduce damage, which is how it should be. Like, Crescendo is not a damaging ability, it should just CC, in my opinion. So they've actually changed Soraka like a lot this patch, and I actually really like Soraka now. I think she will actually be used quite a lot. I know you may call me for bullshit here, and I may be completely wrong, but just looking at her, she's really good for mid-game and late-game teamfights now. That she can really have an impact, which is why I think she's going to come back in. Base stats increased, so 405 from 375, actually a pretty strong change. 30 doesn't look a lot, but considering that's like just under 10%, that's quite a lot. Health per level as well, I mean, she's going to naturally be a bit tankier, but base armor to 9.4. So this just really means that, obviously with Soraka before, you could kill her in the early levels very easily. This is going to make it slightly harder, especially if she starts to build some defense early on her first back. Now, her new passive means that health and mana restoring abilities are 1% more effective for each 2% health or mana the target is missing. So basically, the lower mana your target's on, the more mana you will give them, and the lower health they're on, the more health you will give them, which is actually a pretty cool change. It means that it's very difficult to now bully anyone out of lane with a Soraka, because as soon as you get them really low, Soraka becomes way more effective, which is pretty dumb in my opinion, and one of the reasons why I think she's going to start coming back into play. So her star call here, the magic resistance shred now scales with AP. What a surprise there. See a common theme with all these supports. The magic resistance reduction changed to 6 at all levels, which is pretty good, because at the moment it used to scale with levels. So the more like ranks you put in it, the more magic resistance shred. Finally, the mana cost changed, has been increased at early levels, so it means it's more difficult for you to spam in lane, which is kind of a way of countering out the AP that supports may be building now. Astral Blessing is bonus armor now scales at plus 3 armor per 20 AP. So that means that the more AP you have, the more armor you're going to be giving your ally, which is actually really, really strong. This is mid-game one of the reasons why I think she's going to be so strong. The Salvation is one big reason, because if someone gets low, you can kind of keep them alive for even longer. Whereas this Astral Blessing right now means that it's also not only going to keep them alive longer, but it's going to be even more effective because it gives them a whole chunk of armor. So it's going to take your opponents longer to kill that target. Okay, so the armor duration is reduced to 2 seconds from 3, which kind of means that it's a shorter but stronger bonus. And the healing is going to be reduced because it now has a AP ratio, or the healing and AP ratio is reduced, but you build more AP, so it's going to even out pretty much. Okay, so Infuse is pretty much staying the same. It's just going to be, you donate 5% of Soraka's maximum mana, or you deal 5% of Soraka's maximum mana with your E, so just slightly more damage and slightly more effective. Okay, and this little change, quality of life change, I do like. You can no longer cast on allies who don't use mana or already max mana. It kind of stops you fucking that up. Okay, so let's have a look. Tarek's being reworked as well. So after casting a spell, Tarek gains a buff that deals 30% of his total armor as bonus magic damage on his next auto attack. And they've also reduced his cooldowns, all of his cooldowns when you use an empowered attack by 2 seconds. Now this is really, really cool. So I expect Tarek to come back into play as well. The one problem though is that his dazzle cooldown has been increased. So it means that you don't have your stun as much, which means his, like, when you engage on him, you can just engage again and you won't have his stun. But his actual damage and his healing is going to be better, so it kind of evens out. The cooldown of his heal is going to be reduced. The AP ratio is reduced as well, but his AP ratio was ridiculous before. But it now scales with 5% of Tarek's bonus health, so that means that mid-game this is going to be way more effective again. So you get this kind of theme with all the supports, so they're just making the mid-game support role way more effective with the scalings of all the abilities. The Radiant's ability power ratio reduced, what a surprise, and they've increased the cooldown as well. This means that in a lane you can't use this as much just to random piss about, like run up to the enemy AD, use it, and then run off again like a little troll, like a lot of Tareks would do. But it does mean that when you fully engage, you're actually probably going to do a lot more. So these minor bug fixes, I'm not going to go through these because this isn't really that relevant for me to go through. But these kind of changes, okay, so Doran's Blade, big change here. Reduced to 440 from 475, which means you can now get a health potion and a Doran's Blade as well. The AD is reduced, which is fine, and basic attacks now restore 3 health for ranged, which is lowered, and 5 health for melee champions. So for melee champions, it's not really that nerfed apart from the 2 AD, but you obviously, for ranged champions like ADs, you will be healing less off of that, but you do have the health potion, so it's not really that big a deal. I actually really like this because, especially for players who aren't as comfortable trading, you can now have a health potion with your Doran's Blade, which means if you really fuck up a trade early, you're not screwed. Like at the moment, if you fuck up a trade and you're on 20% health, then you can't lifesteal that back up, so you have to base, and that's when the enemy pushes your lane and the minions get the tower, and then you're kind of fucked for the first 10 minutes of the game. Right now, you kind of recover, which is really good. So I really like this change. Longsword's reduced to 360 from 400 gold. Now, this is also pretty cool because it means you can get even more potions now with a longsword. And so if you... It also, obviously, the AD is remaining the same, right? So now it's going to be more AD than the Doran's Blade. So if you want to just like go for early aggression, then the longsword could be a viable start. Like, you don't have to necessarily pick up a Doran's Blade now every time, though to be honest, when you get health potions with Doran's Blade, I'd still take it, but this is like another option now. And you could also pick up a longsword and a ward, which is also pretty good. You could get a longsword, ward, and a health potion. So it kind of, this, like, for solo laners is a really good way of having damage, but also having a ward and protection. Even though you kind of have your trinket, so I don't know if you necessarily need to have that, but it's just another viable option for you. Obviously, they're removing Oracle's elixir from the game, which is kind of sad, but we'll see how this actually goes. Okay, so support items very quickly. I'm just going to skim over this because I've realized this is a really long video, so I'm sorry, but there's just so many changes coming in. So there are now 3 options that you can have for your gold per 10. You only allow one of these 3, so you have to make your mind up. The first one is Spell Thief's Edge. So it gives you AP, mana regen, 2 gold per 10, and it also means that basic attacks against champions grant 4 gold once up to every 10 seconds per enemy, and killing a minion disables his passive for 10 seconds. So what this means is that if you're the support and you're like trading with the enemy with auto attacks, then you're going to gain even more gold from the gold per 10. And this like little thing at the end, killing a minion disables it, means that laners can't take this. Like this is useless for laners, which is quite clever, I guess. So they're trying to take your laning phase, or for laners like solo laners, away from gold per 10. Okay, so Ancient Coin is the second one. I'll go into these in 2 seconds, but I'm just going to go through the 3 options you have. So the ancient coin is health regen, mana regen, and being near a minion death without dealing the killing blow grants 2 gold. So remember the mastery. If you watch my mastery video, there's a mastery that gives you gold for every minion that's killed. This obviously gives you more gold for it's killed. It's not as useful as this Spell Thief's Edge. Like, look at the stats are pretty crappy, but obviously you get this gold, and if you're the support in bot lane, then this is actually going to all really add up quite quickly. Like 200 gold plus ambient plus like masteries and everything else for your AD killing 100 minions is actually pretty good. Okay, finally the last one is Relic Shield. Now this is more of the tanky one. Obviously the first option is the AP version, damage version. Second option is kind of just the I want gold version. And this third one is the Relic Shield, the kind of tanky option. So 50 health, 6 health regen per 5 seconds. Spells of War. So basically you can last hit for your AD and they'll still get the gold plus 5 extra. And it also is going to give your AD or whoever you're near 2% of their maximum or your maximum health. So as well, so it not only does it heal them, it gives them the gold for the last hit, and it also gives them a bonus 5 gold. Now these effects require nearby champion, obviously, because that's the mechanic that it works, and it recharges every 30 seconds. So it means that when you walk to lane, you'll have your 2 charges. You can do it. This kind of mechanic I'd expect to be used by a support who's just like trying to help your AD last hit under turret, because your AD not necessarily will get all of the minions, and it's going to do 200 damage, like execute below 200. So it's a really easy way of helping your AD pick up last hits under turret, which is actually really smart. So I do like these changes. Now very quickly, just going back, Spell Thief's Edge, which is kind of like cages, I guess, changes to Frostfang. Same general idea, but it just upgrades the AP, mana regen, and again goes into Frost Queen's Claim, which is more AP, gold per 10 still. So the gold per 10 increases from 2 to 4, which is quite a good change. I like that because it encourages you to at least upgrade the item rather than just get the gold per 10 and then forget about it the whole game. So obviously these third items all have an extra thing. So this is like the icy whatever it was called this time around, which reduces it deals magic damage and reduces the movement speed of enemies around. Okay, so let's just go down very quickly. Obviously, this doesn't increase this gives you 2 gold per 10, which doesn't have on here. So this is purely, like the first time you get this, it's just about this dealing the killing blow, and this is actually gives you gold per 10. And then this down here just grants nearby enemies 40% movement speed for 3 seconds. This is like Shirelia's, the Talisman of Ascension. And then finally for the tanky version, you're gonna, this is pretty much exactly the same. It gives you like 175 health, which actually isn't that bad, like considering this is 850 gold in total after the Relic Shield, obviously. No, including the Relic Shield, sorry. So Relic Shield plus the 485, 850 gold is actually pretty good for 175 health with this passive as well. So if you enjoyed the video, please do like and subscribe, and obviously go check my Facebook or my Twitter. I'm going to be doing a giveaway probably later today or tomorrow, so definitely check that out because I've got some awesome stuff to give away for my 50,000. That's all for this video, and I'll catch you next time.